Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Cressway, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. Let's talk about today, because today we have another wonderful guest. He's a University of Texas School of Law graduate and currently works as an attorney and managing partner at Rushing McCarl. He has held past positions as a principal at Rushing Entertainment and as an attorney at Levine and Perconte. Excited to have him on the podcast today, Mr. John Rushing. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today? Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
Great, Nate. Great. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
Oh, I'm just doing fantastic. It is beautiful outside. School is out for the summer, so I'm the happiest camper in the campground right now. You wouldn't even believe it, John. But before we get started, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm John Rushing. I'm a trial lawyer based in Los Angeles. I have a firm with my partner Ryan McCarl called Rushing McCarl LLP. We are a litigation and trial boutique. A lot of people say that they're a litigation boutique, but not a lot of people can actually say, hey, look, we take cases to trial. We try about 2 cases a year. And where Ryan is the genius on the papers, I try to hold at my end when it comes to oral argument and, of course, talking to juries. The firm has been around for 4 years, and we're going strong. And we've had some very big verdicts and very big trials, and looking forward to the next one. That's a little bit about me. You'll see Carol Risher in the back, and Carol is our director of operations. And nothing happens here, at least nothing good happens here without Carol. So glad to have a few minutes to talk to you today.
Of course. I mean, first, always got to shout out Carol. I did before the episode. We're going to do it again. She is the driving force of Rushing McCarl. She makes the car move. But Ryan McCarl, episode 23, was on this podcast. He was a former guest. And now we get the other person that's in that law firm of Rushing McCarl. We're getting the Rushing now. And as always, as I looked over your experiences, the types of schools that you went to, you were at Calvin University, you majored in philosophy, and then you got your master's in philosophy at the University of Oxford, doing Scholastic Philosophy and Theology. So if you don't like philosophy, click off the episode right now. No, I'm just kidding. But I would have to say, looking at you, and the people listening right now can't see you, but you do fit the bill for trial lawyer. You look like the guy. You walk in, everyone's looking at you. You're like, this is the guy who's about to give the oral arguments. I gotta say, you got the look. But we go back to the wonderful year 1998, where you started at the University of Texas. You were at Oxford. So simply put, John, why'd you go to law school?
Well, that's a good question. So law school for so many, myself included, is sort of finishing school for liberal arts majors. And if you really want to know why I went to law school, you have to wind the clock back to 90, probably last half of 96, early 97. I was at Oxford doing an MPhil. The MPhil is the highest degree awarded by examination by the university. And I was working primarily on Aquinas, although I was doing some modern theology as well. And it was a rainy day. I was in the bottom of a library known as the Radcliffe Camera, which is a very famous building there. And I was working some original work by Aquinas. And I had this realization that, my God, this is exactly what I'm going to be doing, for the next 20 years if I finish my DPhil and go on to be a professor. And I didn't not that I didn't like it, I just didn't want to spend my life that way. I like people. I'm a pretty gregarious guy. I'm interested in ideas. I like communication, and I like playing with how I can communicate more directly or more effectively. And there were a lot of great things about philosophy that fit me. And the challenge, of course, with the ideas that I was dealing with. But at the end of the day, I didn't want to spend my life in libraries. I'd much rather spend my life working, shoulder to shoulder with folks and fighting for what I think is right and fighting for my clients. It was the 90s, Nate. You're a little young. You probably weren't even born then, or maybe you were like a twinkle in someone's eye. But Bill Clinton was president, and there was obviously a great connection with President Clinton in Oxford, and there was just a sense of possibility, and that the law was an area where you could contribute and make a big difference. And so I, like so many others, went to law school, and I did go to the University of Texas. I'm from Texas. They were kind enough to give me some money, which tipped the balance. And yeah, the rest is history.
Well, first, I'd just like to say I love the word gregarious. I'm going to now add it into my own vocabulary. And I love the studying of Aquinas. I've never really done a very deep dive, almost very surface level, just through the classes that I take. They mention him. We spend like a week or so on him, and then we move on. But now I'm going to get reinterested just because you're bringing it up and you were interested in it. So clearly, it's an interesting topic because he laid the foundations for what theology would go into for the next 1,000 years after, not thousands, hundreds, sorry, hundreds of years after him. But let's go to the University of Texas. Your first first year, not your first law, your first year. People love it, people hate it. How was it for you?
I love the first year. So I'm a standout, I think, or maybe just an odd duck when it comes to law school. A lot of people say, "Oh, law school is this terrible thing. I slogged through it. It's so hard." And I loved law school. It was like the best 3 years of education I've ever had. And I'm an Oxford man, right? That's saying something. And so I think if you like ideas, you like history, and you like economics, kind of that, confluence of history, economics, and politics, a law school is perfect. I mean, it's just so fascinating. And when you think about the law as a structure that society basically runs on, it becomes really interesting really quickly. And I think that law students do themselves a disservice if they don't try to get sort of behind the black letter rules and start to understand the law as a theory. So, for example, I don't really think of evidence law as a series of rules, although it is a series of rules. I think of it as a theory of truth-telling. And if you think of evidence as a theory of truth-telling, then the rules start to make sense of why we don't allow hearsay, or why we have certain hearsay exceptions, for example. And I think the law is sort of what you make it in that respect. And I think a lot of students really miss out on the richness of the law. And yeah, obviously law school can be a slog, but if it's heavy, it's heavy because it's rich. And I really enjoyed it. So I would say the first 6 weeks, takes a little getting used to, but yeah, for me it was a great 3 years.
So those first 6 weeks, you're getting used to it. You're getting acclimated to what's going on in law school. What are some things that you did to help you get acclimated to that new sort of environment that you were in?
It's a great question. Well, I mean, first of all, I was an older student, right? So I had a master's degree already, and I didn't come directly out of undergrad. I had the benefit of, Oxford is kind of a place where they give you enough rope to hang yourself. Like you literally like can do almost nothing for 2 years, and then you show up, you take a series of exams, and you tender your dissertation, and it's like you may have completely wasted your time if you haven't had discipline. So I had that benefit going in. What I would say to law students, and obviously, look, I'm 50 years old. It's been a while, right? So I don't know what law school is like now. But what I would say is this, you have to throw yourself into this with abandon. And you've got to make the law really, to a large extent, your life. And what I don't mean that in terms of it being all consuming and like it's a burden, but you're beginning to learn a system of thought that is fairly substantial, and you can't do that piecemeal. You have to give yourself to the study of law completely. And so, look, I mean, those first 6 weeks, I think, frankly, and it's going to sound a little silly, but it may be a little obvious, but I think, frankly, actually doing the reading and showing up in class is a big deal. Now, ultimately, yeah, I'm a pretty quick reader. I would skim the cases and show up in class. I would take great notes. I mean, I'm a big believer in going to class, and I have to admit, I didn't read every case after first year, first semester, but I was focused on the task, and I was paying attention, and the big cases I read and I briefed, and I think you really have to lose yourself in it a little bit. You got to kind of fall in love with the ideas.
So a question that I have, really, based on just majoring philosophy, graduating with that degree, and then having a master's in it, how did your experience doing philosophy, doing theology, reading Aquinas, how did that sort of shape your perspective and your experience throughout law school?
That's a really interesting question. Well, so the story with my degree from Oxford is my Latin wasn't good enough to at least reliably take my exams in Latin, which would have been required if I had done only scholastic theology, which is to say medieval philosophy. And so Oxford had a series of exams you could take in modern theology, and so I took modern theology as well as scholastic philosophy and or theology, and that's why I have a degree in those two particular areas. But that said, I'm really grateful that I was required to study modern theology, because you start to see certain themes in the early 20th century that come back and find root in earlier thinkers. So, for example, my dissertation was on the literal exposition of Job, which was a newly translated work by Aquinas back in the 90s. And his treatment of the problem of evil, which is to say, if God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and good, why do moral and natural evils exist? His actual treatment of that is very similar to some modern theologians. And it's not to say that Aquinas is modern; he's certainly not. But it is to say that the discipline of thinking through those ideas rigorously and going through the sort of logical arguments that Aquinas employs is very similar to, for example, briefing a case. And really, this is about the malleability of ideas, and it's about the I guess the ability to be flexible in your thinking. And then, for those of you who know Aquinas, he writes in the sort of in an interlocutor style, which is very similar in some ways to legal reasoning. And so I think that it was sort of a natural fit, and maybe that's why first year law school didn't like freak me out or anything, because it was just sort of an extension of what I was doing. That said, I do think that those first 6 weeks, it can be a shock. I mean, there's a lot of work, and there's a lot to keep up with, and there's a lot of reading, and it's exciting. But, you toughen up and whatever. I mean, you get used to it. So you get used to the pace.
No, I actually, that was the one thing I loved about Aquinas when I did do that surface level reading, is the way that he writes, sort of that conversational, kind of following a line of logic throughout the whole writing. I feel it's very easy to read. I feel like I'm a very logical person, so I felt that it was very good, easy to read. very similar like Aristotle, the way that he writes. I know for some people it might be hard because it's very dry. There's not a lot going on. It's an argument going through and through and pointing out everything. And I think just like your dissertation, that's one of my favorite parts about philosophy is that the fact when you go through and read people from now and then you go back and read others, there's the same similar themes. It's those same problems trying to be solved. Like the problem of evil, I mean, people have been trying to solve that for eternities at this point. And you see the different perspectives, the different ways, the unique ways that people sort of dissect that problem, those main principles stay within the sort of philosophizing that they're doing. See, we're getting crazy already, John. We're really
Yeah, I
getting
know, right? Watch out. It's a party.
there.
Yeah, I actually, Nate, I'd agree with you. I think here's how I would put it. I think the thing about philosophy is that there's a conversation that's going on through the ages between different philosophers, right? And whether it's, whether it's something as simple as how do we perceive and, the epistemology that spins out of that, whether that's something modern or whether it's something ancient, the conversation is happening over a period of centuries, right? Aquinas obviously is tying into Aristotelian logic and into an Aristotelian framework, trying to bring that to theology, trying to make a science of theology. But the same thing is happening in law. And I mean, that's sort of the point of Anglo-American law and case law is that we have a conversation between judges and lawyers over a period of several hundred years. And that conversation has currents and eddies. And, there are times where we think you look back on terrible decisions and you think, my God, how in the world did they get there? But the idea of the law as a structure, and again, this is a philosophical concept. The idea is that I think the law is this invisible structure that everything works on. And so when a law student thinks, oh, okay, now I'm in tort world, or now I'm in contract world, or I'm in, property world or criminal law world or whatever, they're thinking of categorically because that's helpful for them as they learn the body of law in that area. But the law, I think the best legal thinkers understand it as a unified whole. And yeah, of course, there's a body of tort law, there's a body of contract law, and there's a body of property law and civil procedure and whatever, constitutional law. But it's larger than that. And yeah, and I think, philosophy majors, we're used to that kind of thing, right? Like we're used to this sort of, century-old dialogue between thinkers, and that's really what case law is all about.
Yeah, I think one of the fascinating parts about the law as well, obviously, like you said, like it is built upon itself. Each case builds upon itself. It's all precedent, stare decisis. I believe that's what it is. Is that right? Did I say? Oh, look at me go. But one of the most interesting parts about it is that when you look back through the cases, it also very similar to philosophy, but it gives you a peek into what was going on in the world. What was the culture like? What were people acting like at that time? And it could draw us towards and give us reasons why they may have decided that way or why they may have decided another way. One of my favorite classes ever was the history of U.S. trials. It was like totally mind-blowing for me to go back and look through all the stuff. I know the first case we look at is from like 1620. It was in like common law, and they had a pig on trial because they thought he was like a witch or something. And it was just like the funniest thing I ever read. But it just further showed like that's just how people thought. That's just how people viewed the world. That was their perspective on it. But we're gonna stop talking about philosophy and let's talk about your time. You're an attorney at Sidley Austin after law school. And a
Right.
question that I'll tag along onto that is how did you sort of figure out what you wanted to do with the law, the sort of specialization that you found yourself in?
Well, I mean, first, let me just say, specialization is we're governed by the bar. I'm not a specialist or a certified specialist. I am a business litigation attorney, and I do have a focus on breach of fiduciary duty and breach of contract and minority shareholder oppression, that type of thing. But my story is, I am very interested in politics, and I'm very interested in the way in which rulemaking occurs. And so when I left University of Texas. I ended up at Sidley in Chicago. And I split my time, I mean, obviously working full-time for Sidley, but I split my time volunteering for different political campaigns and being involved generally in kind of a bigger discussion in the city of Chicago about the life of the city. And those things go hand in hand because on the one hand, day in, day out, you're representing clients. You're trying to do your best to put their arguments, front and center and make sure that their arguments make sense. But clients are affected by rulemaking, and they're affected by the way in which our society sort of distills issues in the political process. And so in that sort of hand-in-hand thing, I started to realize my strengths are in oral advocacy and in the ability to stand before people and ask them to help whatever cause I'm representing, whether that's in politics, raising money, debating ideas, being on calls or committees, or whether that's in court. That's my secret sauce. That's my I guess that's my edge. And so I was at Sidley for about 5 years, and I was representing Bayer, Pfizer, General Electric, a bunch of different companies in various actions. Very gratifying work. Worked with an incredible team, some of the smartest lawyers I've ever known were at Sidley, and I also would say, I mean, Sidley is one of the best law firms in the world. And when I went to work there was a book called Top 100 Places to Work with a Law Degree, and Sidley was like front and center. So I was really, really excited to be a part of the Sidley team. And I worked with a couple of lawyers at Sidley preparing cases for trial. And I would work these cases up, argue motions in limine, do final pretrial conference. They would bring in the trial lawyers, and then usually the case would settle. And I remember looking at these trial lawyers, and they were all, different types of guys, but I thought these guys have the best job in America. They literally go from one trial to the next. How much fun is that? And there's a John Rushing somewhere that's prepared this thing for trial, and they swoop in, they do 6 weeks of like backbreaking work, and they tell the story, and then they're off to the next one. I thought, man, that's a pretty great way to make a living. And the problem with that is that it's hard to make that your career when you're at the third largest firm in the world, because generally your clients are either settling cases, or if they are going to trial, certainly the fifth-year lawyer isn't going to be the guy first chairing it. So I decided to become a trial lawyer. I went to Levin and Perconti. Steve Levin and John Perconti are two really fine trial lawyers out of Chicago, two of the best lawyers I've ever seen, and I'm grateful to them. They took a fairly polished, Oxford-educated, Sidley lawyer, and they showed me what it means to stand on your own 2 feet in front of a judge and be in a knife fight. And a lot of times trial law is let's just say that sometimes there are some surprises there. And so I feel like I got a great education working at Levin and Perconti. And after that, I was involved in entertainment in a number of ways. And that actually really changed the way I thought about the law and about communication. And I read a book that I recommend to everyone, although no one ever reads it. And it's called Story. I'm just seeing if I've got it on my office shelf. I think it's upstairs in my bedroom. But it's by a guy named McGee, and Story is probably the best thing I've ever read on how you tell stories outside of maybe, I don't know, maybe Aristotle or something. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And it was written for screenwriters. It was not written for lawyers, but the principles of story and how to effectively communicate a story, um, they hold universal lessons, and they hold important lessons, I think, for trial lawyers. And so, having been in entertainment and having been a producer and having worked with actors and been an actor myself and devoted, a number of years of my life to understanding story, really transformed the way I think about communicating in court. And you see that in Rushing McCarl's work, whether it's written or oral. You will see that we put story front and center, we put narrative front and center. And early on, we're thinking about how is this going to play before a jury? That's never a last minute consideration. It's usually front and center. And, one of the examples I use of this is fairly early in discovery, after we started to take some of the major depositions, we understand where the case is going. I start writing my opening statement. And a lot of lawyers won't do that until you're, 2 weeks, trial set. And my point of view is that opening statements have to be, they got to marinate, right? They got to percolate, and you've got to allow them, those themes to develop. And you have to be a little circumspect, because all sorts of things happen in a case, and some things are predictable and some things aren't. And an example of that was a trial we had about a year and a half ago, where the other side had this theme of bait and switch. Your client, they said one thing, they did another. It's bait and switch. And I knew early on that I wanted to play with the idea that a man's word is his bond, a person's word is his bond, her bond, and that a contract is a contract, right? And you have an agreement. We got to, we call that a contract, and companies have to stand by their word. But the way that the trial developed, it became very clear that the other side, every time they would use bait and switch, it became very clear to me, this wasn't bait and switch, this was dine and dash. And if you are working against a deadline where you're tight and you're like, you don't know what to do, and you're like, I just got to get this thing down. You waited till the last minute, you just don't have the bandwidth to kind of roll with the punches and to be relaxed. And because I had the opening statement, really figured out early on, it allowed me to work those themes into the trial, to tease out evidence as it came out and was surprising. And then in closing statement, I got to go, look, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this isn't a bait and switch, it's a dine and dash. And then I take a couple of minutes to go, I used to work at McDonald's, and at least that's what we called it when I was there. They take the food and they run without paying it. It's called a dine and dash. That's exactly what happened in this case. You can't do that unless you've done deep, deep, deep preparation. And so story was particularly helpful in my thinking about trial law and how best to tell a story to a jury.
I mean, John, I gotta say that might have been like the best 5 minutes this in the podcast history. Like, this is brilliant. I'm at a loss for words. I mean, the fact that you just casually threw in there that you were an actor and just kind of kept talking on, I thought that was amazing, because it just shows how much depth you've gone through in your life, how many things you've done, how many hats you've worn. It's a dream of mine. I hope to wear many hats myself. And of course, Story by this McGee fella, I will be buying today, John. Don't you worry. It's coming in on Amazon. I'm buying it after this.
That's a great book.
But
well, and let me just say that one other thing on that, Nate. I actually, I mean, look, man, I get it. Different strokes for different folks. It's all good, right? But I think the best people don't necessarily have a straight line through their life. And the reason I say that it's not like morally better people or anything like that. It's just me people that I like and that I gravitate toward. The thing is, I have always been driven by my curiosity. It was my curiosity that got me to Calvin College. It was my curiosity that got me involved in philosophy and took me to England. It was my curiosity that got me to law school. And when I was at law school, I spent a lot of time at the LBJ school. I worked with, I took classes from Elspeth Rostow, and I knew Walt Rostow and Lady Bird Johnson and Admiral Inman, who was the head of NSA and deputy director of CIA, is a mentor of mine. I wouldn't know any of those people. I wouldn't have had any of those experiences if it hadn't been for my curiosity. And my curiosity took me to Sidley, and my curiosity got me working for this guy with a weird name who was a state senator named Barack Obama. And my curiosity got me in rooms with this guy named David Wilhelm, who used to be the head of the DNC. And David one day says to me, "John, who do you like for president in 2004?" And I said, "David, I think after 9/11, Bill Clinton couldn't get elected president. It's got to be a U.S. senator. And I like this guy named Joe Biden. Before I know it, I'm on Joe Biden's committee to elect him president." And I'm like, 30 years old or something. And Katrina's hit, and we're having conference calls about, what the Democratic Senate should do about Katrina, or Democratic minority in the Senate. And none of that stuff happens unless you follow your curiosity and your passion. And my curiosity and my passion took me from the law to movie sets. But guess what? That's also what taught me about story. That's what taught me about deep empathy. It's what opened up my heart in a really meaningful way, let the light in, and that is what enriches my ability to stand before a jury and frankly, just let them see who I am and tell the truth and do it in a compelling way for my clients. And you know what? Life takes all sorts of twists and turns. It doesn't mean there isn't a through line. And when you look back on it, it's a funny thing. You say this now being 50, look back on it, it all makes sense. At the time, I don't know. I mean, at the time you're like, "Hey, what are you doing in 20 whatever?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm sailing to Antarctica and I'm making a movie." And you're like, "You're doing what?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It seems like the thing to do. And, we got money for it and it's all good." But I look back at that and I go, yeah, I learned something in that process that brought me where I am. And hopefully it helps my clients and their matters. I certainly think it does.
I mean, I aspire to be John Rushing. I gotta be honest. Like, it's incredible right now. The things coming out of your mouth, they're just
you're in real trouble.
absolutely blowing my mind right now. I had down here that you were a teaching assistant to the Admiral Bob Inman. I did not know he was the director of the NSA.
Yeah, Admiral Inman is the first four-star. He's the first four-star intelligence officer in I think U.S. history, but certainly in U.S. naval history. Admiral Inman was a graduate of the University of Texas and went into Navy intelligence. Ended up running DIA. Was head of naval intelligence, and then President Carter made him the head of the NSA. He sort of helped transition the NSA into what I would call just sort of the modern intelligence community, shifting, I don't know if it was signals intelligence to telemetry intelligence or what, but he's sort of considered the father of the modern NSA. And at the time, he had 3 stars. And then candidate Reagan said to him, Admiral Inman would like you to be deputy director of CIA, and he turned him down. And then President-elect Reagan said, "I'd like you to be deputy director of CIA," and he turned him down. And then when Ronald Reagan was inaugurated on the very first day of his presidency, he called up Admiral Inman into the Oval Office, and he said, "I asked you as a candidate, I asked you as a president-elect, now I'm ordering you as commander-in-chief. You're going to be the deputy director of the CIA, and I'm going to give you your 4th star for it." And this is back when CIA was a dual directorship. where the deputy director was in charge of essentially intelligence gathering, and the director was in charge of operations. Now CIA's, my understanding is that it's a unified directorship. But he worked with Bill Casey, and Bill Casey and Bob Inman are different. They're very different men, and I think Admiral Inman has an incredible amount of integrity, and also someone you would think Bob Inman, this in my opinion, like truly American hero, an incredible man. What a guy, and you would think like, okay, so this weird guy John Rushing, who's like all over the place, is friends with Bob Inman. What does Bob Inman think about it? And I'll tell you this: I saw him. We get together usually once every year and a half, something like that, and we talk. We do Zooms and we catch up, but we see each other for breakfast when he's in Los Angeles. And I was driving around with him, in my little SUV, and he's like, "Well, John, how's the life of being an actor?" I said, "Well, Admiral, and I'm thinking I may take the bar and go back into the law." And he said, "My career, I didn't plan it that way, but it just sort of seemed to have these 10-year increments where every 10 years I was doing something different." Of course, Bob Inman famously left the intelligence community. I mean, to the extent that anyone leaves the intelligence community once they're at that level, and then went into private equity and had an amazing career sitting on different boards. He's on the board of Caltech. He was on the board of Dell, Sun Microsystems. And, he just said, look, you kind of have to take it as it comes. And it's funny, you look back at it, and my career is in these 10-year segments. And now I look back at my career and I go, it's exactly right. It was like in these 10-year segments, right? But it all makes sense. And it's about curiosity. And I think it's about really bringing yourself 100% to whatever you're doing and having some excitement about it, and not bitching and moaning and saying, "Oh my God, what woe is me, I got to do this." Like, if you don't like what you're doing, go do something else. So
I mean, still, it's just, I don't even know what to say. I mean, you're name dropping the craziest people. You're giving the craziest, the most amazing advice that's probably ever given on this podcast from Bob Inman, former director of the NSA, deputy director of the CIA. I mean, Barack Obama, Joe Biden. I mean, gee, he's presidents of the United States. It's just
Bob Inman's a good man, and I guess I'm just sort of the zealot of law. I'm just sort of in the right place at the right time.
But I have to ask about your time as the principal at Rushing Entertainment. What did you do there? What kind of actor are you? I mean, I'm just infatuated right now. I need to know everything.
Well, Rushing Entertainment is kind of a long story. So when I was in Chicago, I had a bunch of friends that were actors and writers, and I love theater. Okay, I grew up in this small little Texas town, and it's where there's a big oil field there, and there are a bunch of good old boys that back in the early 1900s made a whole bunch of money, and they married these society ladies and brought them back to Corsicana. And I think these society ladies were like, "Oh my God, what am I doing? This place?" And they endowed a theater, or as we say in Texas, a theater. So I had the benefit of growing up in a small Texas town that had some arts. And when I was 4 or 5, my mom put me in theater classes, and I really loved it. And I was a theater kid. That's what I did. And when I was 15, I decided to pursue acting professionally, and I did some commercials and print work, and I did like an after school special or something, for the Boy Scouts, and went off and studied philosophy and, did my thing. And then I find myself in Chicago, and I'm in my late 20s, and I'm going to all these, I'm kind of gravitate to theater and to artists. And I would watch some very small theater. I mean, Chicago has got an incredible theater community. And in a lot of ways, I know this is anathema to someone on the East Coast, but in a lot of ways, it's better than New York in that the cost of production is so much lower in Chicago. You can take bigger risks, and you have some very interesting playwrights working in Chicago. And of course, all the best end up in New York anyway. But I was just like amazed. And I just thought, I'd like to help these folks. And before I knew it, I was like, well, maybe I'll take an acting class. And I did it for fun, right? And then I was like, oh, that was really good. I really enjoyed that, man. You know, and then I took another acting class. And before I know it, I have an agent and I'm doing commercials, and then I'm doing short films. And my wife had a son. Well, we had a son, and although she did most of the work. And so my son was a year old. I'd done very well in the law, and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to take a year off, kind of see where this goes. My father was very ill, and it was good timing. Not his illness, but to be with family. And I just fell back in love with acting and followed my curiosity. And I ended up I I did a Meisner program in Chicago, and I ended up getting really lucky. I met this fantastic playwright named Andrew Hinderaker, who is pretty well known now, and actually several very fantastic playwrights, not just Andrew, many of whom are now working in Hollywood. And I ended up auditioning at the Victory Gardens, which is a pretty well-known theater in Chicago. And I got hired as an understudy on this show called The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity by Christopher Diaz. And I was like, man, this is great, doing the understudy thing. This is awesome. Hanging out with my boy. It was like, my boy is this big. And it's hip hop theater, and it's a show about wrestling, but it's really about America, and it's about economics, and it's about how sort of minority interests get co-opted by big business. And the play got nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, and it frankly should have probably won, in my opinion, it should have probably won the Pulitzer, but it hadn't been put on in New York yet. So all of a sudden, I'm understudying this play that's nominated for the Pulitzer Prize, and I'm working with, Usman Ali and Dez, who of course went on to great fame, and has his own TV show, or had his own TV show as a series regular. And Usman Ali he's been in everything, and I got a couple of performances, which was great, and that opened doors for me, and I got to know a guy named Tracy Letts, and Tracy Letts, of course, is the Tony-winning writer of August Osage County. Anyway, man, I ended up in Los Angeles. It's a long story, and I started Rushing Entertainment in order to produce films, and I had a Tracy Letts film in my hip pocket, and just started working, doing what I could to produce films. And so in that process, I, of course, was acting, and that was part of the way I made a living. I taught advanced sort of master level acting at the Margie Haber Studio. Margie is a pretty famous acting coach. She coached Brad Pitt. And I ended up coaching on set in a couple of different movies, one in China and one in Canada. Worked with Lucas Till, who is a great TV fame now as MacGyver. I coached Lucas a little bit, but I wasn't really coaching Lucas. I was coaching another actor. And in that process, the idea, the root of empathy and how you can see from other people's point of view, it really started to transform not only me personally, but me as an advocate. And Rushing Entertainment ended up, we put together a bunch of pitches for reality television, and I had a gold thing that we went out, and there was this guy named W.C. Jameson who talks like this, W.C. Jameson, and he finds abandoned gold mines. And so I went out in the Nevada desert with him, and we found the abandoned gold mine, and like panned gold shows up. We tried to sell that to Discovery. I had a show about Antarctica that I was a small part of, which we pitched. Had a show that we sold called The Best X, where you could kind of win what you lost in the divorce. Which was for whatever reason, I don't know, it didn't take off. But I made a couple of movies, and I was, I was very blessed to be a part of a movie called Gut Shot Straight, where I was an associate producer. And we shot that in Vegas. The movie did okay. And then I did some post-production producing related to distribution on a movie called Private Number. And then, of course, I produced, short films and whatever. And Rushing Entertainment, it was the summer of 2019. My partner and I had the Tracy Letts film, which we've been trying to get set up for a while. Looked like it was ready to go. Funding fell through. These things happen. And I called my wife, and my wife was in Michigan at the time, visiting her parents, and I said, I think I'm going to take the bar, and I'd kind of been playing with like going back into the law for a while. I was like, man, I think maybe I'll take the bar. Lisa's like, John, do not take the bar. It's a terrible idea. Do not do this. I said, yeah, I know. I mean, I'm licensed in Texas and I'm licensed in Illinois, but I was like, how hard can it be, right? I need like a little, I don't know, like a little structure. It'll give me structure for the summer. It'll be great. And I wasn't intent on going back into the law. I was literally just a movie producer that was like, yeah, man, I don't know. I don't want to sit by the pool for another summer, and pitch pieces. So I signed up for the California bar. I'm sorry, it's a long story, but I'm getting somewhere. I signed up for the California bar, and I'm like, all right, so I got to take Barbary, right? And I show up at Barbary, and I mean, I'm like geriatric, dude. I'm like, oh my God. I'm in my late 40s, and like all these people are so young, and they're all studying, and they have their little study groups. And I'm like, hey man, you want to see we study torts together? And this kid's like, okay. And so I like go, study torts with this guy, and I think this guy's a fucking idiot, pardon my language. I'm like, he doesn't. I was like, I don't know where he went to law school. This is not going to do. So I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So I find this UCLA law professor named Ryan McCarl. And I say, Ryan, I want to hire you for the summer. You're going to be basically my tutor, but what I really need is just somebody to like frog march me through this, because I've got a great work ethic. It's been 17 years since I've taken a bar exam. He's like, okay. And Ryan and I just totally hit it off. And I remember one day we're like sitting in my house, and I've got a migraine headache, and I'm sitting in a dark room, and I'm sitting like this, and I'm just like reciting facts of Supreme Court cases. And Ryan goes, you are one of the fewest people I know that has the same work ethic I do. And I was like, at the time, I was like, whatever, it's the bar, you got to study, right? So I take the bar, I pass it, and that had, Ryan is a good dude, and I really clicked with him. And it, you finish the bar in late July, and I'm sitting there thinking from July until November, I was like, first of all, two very surprising things happened. One, I really like this cat named Ryan McCarl. He's a good guy. And two, I remembered why I love the law. I had been away from the law for about 10 years, and I remembered why I became a lawyer. I remember why I fell in love with being a lawyer. And it was like, I don't know, it was like meeting your college girlfriend all over again. And you're like, I love it. And the ideas and the way the ideas function, but I was seeing it differently because of the experience I had. And so when I passed the bar, I called Ryan. I said, hey, I want to take you out to dinner. And I took him to Musso and Frank's. I bought him a martini. And I said, Ryan, you are too brilliant, and I am too old to work for other people. We should start a law firm. And that was the winning argument. And so it took us, I don't know, 6 or 8 months to do the planning for Rushing McCarl, and the rest is history.
I mean, John, you're like the best storyteller I've ever met in my entire life. Like, You are absolutely on fire right now.
Uh,
I haven't stopped smiling for like 25 minutes. My face starting to hurt. Like
uh,
it's oh my, I'm loving it.
read story, then you'll be the best storyteller.
Exactly. This is the best example of why you should read that book right here, right now, what everyone is listening to right now. So as of right now, you are an attorney and managing partner at Rushing McCarl, as you had just said. And talk about what you're doing now. What do you guys do? And what does the future look like?
That's great. Well, the future's bright. The firm has myself, Ryan McCarl, Davida Vagian. We have had a fourth associate in the past. She left us, but we've just hired our fourth associate who will be joining us in the fall, which is great. And her name is Miriam. She is the editor-in-chief of the USC Law Review. Absolutely first round draft pick. She turned down Gibson Dunn to come work for little old Rushing McCarl. We're very thrilled to have her. Davida Vagian is a top drawer graduate of University of Notre Dame, and I'm with honors at UT. So I mean, I'm the token. I guess I'm the token public school guy. And Ryan McCarl, of course, is University of Chicago. The firm, as we sort of titrate up or down with the number of matters that we're handling, the firm sometimes will work with up counsel or bring people in temporarily to help us. But the thing about Rushing McCarl is that we are extremely discerning when it comes to, one, who we hire. We're long to hire because we are looking for people that have our intensity and that have our commitment to doing things at an excellent level. And I know that everyone says that, everyone gives lip service to it, but what we're doing is we're making Fabergé eggs. We're not making scrambled eggs. And there are a lot of lawyers that make scrambled eggs, and that's fine. But, we charge a premium rate in the market, and we are committed to delivering for our clients, AmLaw 50 level quality. And you'll see that in our work. I mean, we bested Nixon Peabody to the tune of $17.8 million. Nixon Peabody is one of the largest firms in the world. I just had Carol, was that a 2-week trial or a 3-week trial? 3-week trial against Shepard Mullen in a case that had $15 million at least of potential liability. And their pleaded liability was like 3 something, and I held them to 1.6. And I know that sounds like, wow, you lost 1.6 million. No, I didn't lose 1.6 million. I saved the client 13.5 million. And I mean that because we took that case 30 days before discovery closed and nothing had been done. And the guys at Shepard Mullen are good attorneys, and it's great to have worthy adversary, but they weren't even able to prove. We held their damages down to less than their people had invested, which I think is an exceptional result. And we defeated their RICO claims, and we kept their punitive damages out, and they didn't get attorney's fees, and that's a win all day long, especially on a case that you didn't actually develop. And as an aside there, I do believe that we would have won that case on appeal, but sometimes a good result is a good result, and you settle it. I've got another case that's going to go to trial at the end of, Carol, is it June or July we're taking that dental case? June. So we're going to trial in June. That's going to be a great case. We worked it up well. We have a very, very clear damage model. The case, I assume that I will be asking the jury for about $4 million on that. And then we have a case in October that's a $10 million plus case that we're going to try. Interdispose, I don't know, whatever the word is. In between all of that other stuff, we have all of our regular clients. So, for example, about 10% of what I do is structuring and business formation. It's a very small thing that I do, but I do it to service our existing clients that we do litigation for. So I recently put together a $2 million movie deal, and I'm going to be on set working with filmmakers in Malibu in about 10 days. I think maybe they're going to put their lawyer in the background in a cameo, which will be great. We have a website called Live the Sail Life that one of our clients has put together. It's a social media site for sailors. So we're doing the paper on that. There's a lot of exciting things happening. And in terms of acting, look, man, I'm a lawyer. My name is on a law firm. Nothing's going to change. Until I'm going to hopefully I die shot by a jealous husband at the age of 96, right? But if that happens, my name is going to be on a law firm, right? Like I love what I do. I absolutely love it. But I also do a little acting every now and then when people have a good sense to hire me. So like 3 weeks ago, I was on Young and the Restless. I've got a 2-episode arc coming up on the show called The Family Business. I don't know, man. We'll see what comes next. So it's a fun old life.
I'm consciously thanking past Nate right now because I feel like everything I've ever done in this podcast was to do this episode and talk to John Rushing at this moment. No disrespect to the past guests, but this is my all-time favorite episode.
You're very kind.
I swear on my life, like I have never had so much fun before just listening to you talk about the experiences. I mean, you're just like, oh, I was on the Young and the Restless. Like, you just throw it casual like that.
Well, the Young and the Restless was hilarious because I had auditioned for YNR several times, and I said to my manager, I was like, somebody over there really likes me, but they never hire me, right? And so anyway, so they had me audition for this thing back in December, and he calls me, he's like, "You're booked." I'm like, "You're kidding!" Like they finally snapped out of it. They hired me. And so I go to Young and Restless. I actually had a scene with Eric, which is like a huge deal. Just nominated for an Emmy for the first time in many years. This is Victor. Like this is the guy, right? Victor and his wife. And then I have I'm hanging out with Jack and Diane, and I have 3 or 4 really good little scenes, and it's a very small role. But my wife goes, "Hey, how was Young and the Restless?" And I said, "Man." It was like the good hair convention, like beautiful. All these guys with this great hair and these beautiful women. It was absolutely. I don't know what they had me doing there, but anyway, it was fun. Let me see if I can find a picture to show you. It was pretty funny, man. I mean, it was just one of those deals where you go, well, what a fun life. What a fun life you live. I don't know if you can see that, but there I am with Victor and Jack. So thankfully I had a decent haircut, but my hair isn't quite as good as theirs. Joe Biden once said in a lunch meeting, and I'm not kidding, like 2000, I think it was probably, I don't know, 2005 or 2006. He goes, "Well, if I had hair as good as John Rushing, I'd be president by now." I say, "Well, Senator Biden, if I had a brain as smart as Joe Biden, I'd be a senator by now." Anyway.
I mean, it's incredible. That's incredible. That is actually incredible. I mean, he's the president of the United States right now. He's the commander in chief, and he's telling you got great hair. So,
well, he wasn't a commander in chief then. He was just a U.S. senator, and I don't know President Biden. I mean, I'm one of thousands of people that did a very small part to try to help him back then, and I'm grateful that. I'm grateful that he let me help the campaign out, and I was lucky enough to have lunch with him a couple of times, and I'm very impressed by President Biden, and I mean, anyone that devotes their life to public service is pretty impressive to me.
So we're down to our last 5 questions. I'm going to stop myself before I ask anything else about you, because eventually we're gonna have to talk again. I gotta be honest, because I need to know so much more. But last 5 questions. The first question is about the precipice, the new era that the law seems to be moving in, the tradition that what it once used to be. I know people, think about typewriters going to computers. Now computers are now turning into AI. There's new softwares. There's all these different tools that people can use. So this is more of the tech stack question per se. What are some
Sure.
software products, some AI products, just things that helped your law firm cut the overhead, be more effective, be more efficient? Any suggestions to anyone?
It's a really good question. So, first of all, I think if you're a transactional attorney, you're an endangered species. I think that there's sort of a part of the market where AI, whether it should or shouldn't, is going to displace a certain level of attorney, which I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but I just mean as a matter of practicality. It used to be that if you wanted to, buy and sell a business, or you wanted to hire someone, or you wanted to do, fill in the blank, you had to hire a contract attorney and they would put together the paper. I do think AI is going to displace that part of the market. I also think that AI is a threat to traditional legal models, in that traditional legal models are based on leverage. Lawyers don't make a lot of money based on their time. I mean, I know you go, well, you bill it whatever an hour, and it's a lot of money. Yeah, it's a lot of money compared to what, some people can bill an hour, but most lawyers, you can't bill 40 hours a week. It's just not possible. At least I don't think it, I think it's unusual. And so you have a lot of down hours, or a lot of hours like this where, you're doing things related to the business, but not directly billable to the business. And so leverage in a law firm has been traditionally the way the law firm makes money, meaning paralegals, associates, and support staff. Well, AI undercuts that leverage, and that is a very dangerous thing for, I think, mid-market, middle-sized firms. Large firms, probably not going to make a big difference to. They're going to get a little leaner. They're going to get a little meaner. We're already seeing that with, for example, Skadden, making their footprint smaller. And this is where I think the law is going. You're going to see smaller footprints in terms of real estate. You're going to see more ability to work from home, which I think is a win-win in a lot of ways, because of course you can get top talent. They don't have to come to a particular area. But I do think that this issue of leverage is going to hurt mid-market firms. And it's going to hurt them because mid-market firms, in order to maintain their cash burn, they need that leverage, right? And so you're going to start to see, I think, partners depart those firms, either for boutiques or for big law, but I think it's going to really be hard on the middle market. Could be wrong, that's my opinion. Now, in terms of boutique law, it's just like the greatest boon in maybe ever for a lawyer like myself, right? So I love litigating. I love it. I love trial. But here's the deal. It takes soldiers, right? When I was at Sidley in my last year, we were doing document review, and one of the projects I had was to oversee 60 contract attorneys doing document review. But can you imagine? We had an entire floor of another skyscraper with 60 contract attorneys, and they had double screens, and they were just like reviewing documents. Okay, caveman lawyer, yeah, that's back in the day. That's how it's done. But now we have AI-driven software that can help do document review. It doesn't completely do it, but it helps the attorney be a lot more efficient. It uses machine learning, and it helps flag documents that may be hot documents that you need to look at. That is what I call asymmetric warfare. I'm currently working on a book called Elegant Legal Advocacy, and this is a really important part of elegant legal advocacy, which is you've got to use asymmetric warfare to your benefit. And I just put it this way. Look, George Washington, and in the founding of this country, we had continental armies, and we had Lexington and Concord and the British squaring off against Washington's army. Well, let me tell you, brother, there were a lot of guerrilla warfare going on. A lot of guys in the Carolinas that were in there making quick hits, getting out, and warfare changed. And that's what's happened in litigation. And so for the first time, I think, at least in my practice, a small firm really can go against the big boys and win. And one of the reasons we can do that, I'll say this and I'll be quiet, is because we're agile. And if you think about being a partner in, let's say, a 1,000-lawyer law firm, it takes an act of Congress in order to say, hey, we're going to use this new software. Not at Rushing McCarl. John Rushing and Ryan McCarl can make that decision tomorrow, and then we can implement its benefits right away for our clients. So yeah, I think AI has changed things quite a lot.
So my next question here, fourth to last question, as I dig for this book here, upon all of this paper that I have, speaking of elegant writing things, I have Elegant Legal Writer right here by Ryan McCarl. Look at that, primed and ready to go. But that's the question here. What are live John Rushing on the Lawyers in the Making podcast? We already talked about Story by McGee, but what are some other book recommendations you have for people?
It's a great question. So first, elegant legal writing is, look, consider the source. I'm the guy's partner. As far as I'm concerned, we're married, man. Obviously I'm a big fan. In all seriousness, though, elegant legal writing is the best thing that I've ever read on legal writing. And what makes it unique is that it's sort of a global view of how you simplify your writing, you focus your writing to make it compelling and to really focus on that narrative. But also there's some practicality in there about, hey, how does the page look? How does that help the reader? How do we signal the reader through the brief so that you get to the outcome that you want? And as a guy that, I do a fair amount of reading, let me tell you, those structural issues are super important. I don't think there's anyone better in the business right now than Ryan McCarl when it comes to legal writing. And I encourage your listeners to get the book. And no, I don't make a dime on it. It means nothing to me personally. Other books that I recommend, look, first, I think that law students need to have circumspection. And I think that's hard to have. What I would recommend is The Practicing Stoic by Farnsworth. It is an exceptional book. I've read the Meditations many times, but Marcus Aurelius can be a little off-putting to the uninitiated. I think that The Practicing Stoic it's pretty exceptional. And I think that the ability to be non-reactive, not to not know what you feel. I think it's really important to know what you feel, but to be non-reactive to it is an important skill for an attorney. Other books that I would recommend, Jerry Spence. I don't know if you know Jerry Spence. I always wonder, like in my generation, Jerry Spence was, he's a legend. People may not know who he is anymore, but in my opinion, Jerry Spence, he's like the granddaddy of all trial lawyers. He's right up there with Clarence Darrow. And Jerry Spence has a book called Win Your Case. And I think Win Your Case is a pretty exceptional read, and it's really worth the time because you have a chance, again, like we said earlier when we began, to have a dialogue with one of the great minds in legal communication, and then to figure out what works for you. Those are three books that I think I'd start with.
Those are three wonderful books. And just like you said, to have a chance to enter into the minds of those people. I'm a lover of old books, and that's what I do all the time. I just take a dive in. I get to see what they're thinking, and I try to replicate it in my own frameworks when I'm making decisions. I'm like, what would Plato think? And then I figure
what would Jerry Spence do? WWJD.
Exactly. So third to last question here. What are the sorts of things you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis? Would that be through social media? So Instagram, X, YouTube, Reddit, Substack, Facebook, any podcasts you listen to that you...
Oh man, I love this. This is a great question. Okay, so I read Political Wire every day. I like Political Wire because it's just sort of a news clipping service, and if I find something I like, I can jump out to it. I think that's great. I read the New York Times pretty much cover to cover. When I was at Oxford, I read 3 papers a day. When I was in law school, I read 2. It's really hard to find the time to read the papers cover to cover the way I used to, but I do read the New York Times. I I mean, look, you may guess that I'm a liberal Democrat, seeing like we've talked politics. Yeah, no shock there. But I do read the Drudge Report, and I do it because I think it's important to at least have a sense of what another side of the country is thinking and seeing. In terms of podcasts, I mean, it's probably pretty boring, but I think the Daily is great. I listen to the Daily. I really enjoy that. I'm currently reading a book called The New Cold War, which I recommend highly. It's a really interesting book. It's about Russia and the rise of China, and how the last three administrations, in making what looked like decisions at the time that made sense and were good decisions, how those things sort of built up and may have resulted in an outcome that they hadn't intended. At the end of the day, in terms of consumption, again, you got to follow your interest and your passion. I work in Hollywood, and I know a lot of people in the industry. So you're going to find me on deadline. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's happening. I'll read that a couple times a week at least. And then, the last thing I'd say for law students, and this is nothing to do with feeding your mind, but it also has to do with the discipline that it takes, I think, to be as successful, well, maybe a successful lawyer, hopefully a good person. Arnold Schwarzenegger famously said that he wouldn't hire people that didn't work out. And I don't go that far. But I think that making time for yourself to get physical exercise is really important. And the reason I say that isn't because it's the physical exercise, although yeah, that's great. But the discipline that it takes to actually carve that out of your schedule and to say, nope, this is my time. This is what I'm going to do. That shows a mental toughness and a resilience and a focus that I think is really important. And as an employer, it's something that I like to see. I box a couple of days a week, and I race sailboats. And, I obviously, if I have a trial, I'm not going to box. And if I have a trial, I'm not going to race sailboats. But otherwise, you're going to find me on the water every Wednesday night. And that's important. And that is a type of consumption. What it is we trade our life and our time for different things. That's what the cost of things are. The exact cost of things is what your time is. And it's important to pay that back to yourself. And so I do that in those ways.
I have to agree on all counts. I love the gym. I love the physical activity. I don't think I'd go to those lengths. Maybe I do. I don't know. But I don't want to be a self-proclaimed gym bro. But I do take it very, very, very serious, and I've put in a ton of time into it. I'm one of those people. I bring a notebook to the gym, so I'm like, it's like when I pull it, I always like, whoa, this guy. But I just makes my brain feel good. It makes the way that I do things much more efficient. I'm a pen and paper guy. I don't have an app or anything. I just use the whole book, and that's really it. And I do my programs. I go through it. I change programs sometimes. Really get into it sometimes. I don't mean to, but I have a lot of fun with it, and it's very fun, sculpting yourself and making you look like a Greek statue, because that's the goal.
I'm no Greek statue, man. I'm just trying to get my cardio in, but I think that I do think that the discipline of saying, okay, I'm going to carve this out, and it's important, and I think it's important. This is a profession, for your listeners, that this profession has a problem with drugs and alcohol. This profession has a problem with addiction, and it's well known, and the bars of the different states have ways of helping lawyers that have addiction problems. But I mean, I think a lot of times those addiction problems come from trying to self-medicate and trying to manage stress. This is, there are not a lot of professions that come with an oath, and this one does, and that means something. And that means sometimes you've got to put your clients ahead of maybe sometimes your family. I mean, I'm there for my family. It is going to be a big deal if I miss something. But if a federal judge tells me I got to be in court, I got to be in court. And that's just the way it is. And I think that a lot of lawyers would do themselves a real favor to have some type of way to blow off steam, other than maybe some booze and a big thick New York strip. Although I like a New York strip as much as the next guy. Anyway.
So, second to last question, John. You're working at Rushing McCarl. You're also being an actor. You're probably doing 10,000 other things as well. But what is an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for John?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, oh, that's a good question. Ideal, I don't know. I'm picking my wife up from the airport in about 45 minutes, and hopefully we'll probably go have dinner tonight, and that'd be great. Sunday morning, my son is on the U.S. sailing team, and he is on the water all the time, and so I have to take him to the marina. Often we'll be in San Francisco, and he'll be practicing. Sunday morning, if I can find the time to actually get a physical paper and read the New York Times, and and I don't know, maybe do a little sailing, that would be great. Every now and then I have a cigar, not regularly, but every now and then, if Lisa's doing yoga or something, and she does it's a cup of coffee and a paper, and I don't know, maybe 6 times a year a cigar. That's a pretty good Sunday morning.
I mean, your son's on the U.S. sailing team. You just throw that in there real casual. I love it so much.
Oh, the kid is 16, and he's forgotten more about sailing than I'll ever know. I mean, it's like the kid's incredible. He's a great sailor.
So, last question, John. I do this at the end of every single episode, but what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
Oh, yeah. I think a lot of young people have what I call the despair of possibility. I think Kierkegaard actually said that. And the despair of possibility is the idea that everything is open to you. And it feels like that. It feels like that when you're in your 20s, and it should. And I think that's a great thing. But life has a way of narrowing. And the target goes from this to this to this to this. One of my mentors used to say, and I really didn't like it, and I don't know if I still like it, but he said, a young man is a theory and an old man is a fact. And what I would say is that you follow your passion and your curiosity, but do it in a smart and disciplined way. Do not be a dilettante. Do not dabble. The law is much, much more important than just dabbling in it. The law is a noble profession. People have forgotten that. And if you can give yourself to the law, and you can really embrace the responsibility that comes with being an advocate, I promise you, you're going to find a rewarding career. The attorneys that are unable to do so are miserable. And life is too short to be miserable. So if you don't like it, go find something else to do. That's my words of wisdom.
Well, John, I couldn't agree more. It's the tagline of this podcast that there is no straight path to law school. There's no straight path to the law. There's only your own unique journey, and everyone has their own unique skill sets and unique interests and unique curiosities. It's just about finding them, pursuing them, and making it happen. But John, that's the episode. That's the podcast. I think you've officially etched yourself into the history of the Lawyers in the Making podcast. I don't have a Hall of Fame. I might as well make one for you at this point. But thank you so much for coming on here.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And good luck to yourself. And I wish you a great day.
Of course. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com, lawyersinthemaking, one word, substack.com, and I will see you in the next.